this story, I'm telling this story because when we were talking about the cities or the powers, you have to be able to prove to yourself that it's real. The TM people want you to lift off the ground, okay? There's lots of things you can do, but one way or another you're going to have to prove to yourself that your mind and the reality are interlaced. For Jesus, he had to turn water into wine. He had to do it. He had to do something. I remember when I was first trying to do this, because they told me I had to try to work this. This is before I ever went in here or anything. And I decided I wanted to manifest an orange in my hand. I don't know why it was an orange, but that's what I wanted to do. And I used to sit around for hours going, there's an orange in my hand. There's an orange, I know there's. And there was one time, this is so funny. There was one time when I was sitting in a circle of people and we were meditating. It was about 12 people. And we were meditating. We'd been meditating for maybe about an hour. And then we came out of the meditation. Well, for about the last half hour while I was in there, I had my hands like this, going, there's an orange in my hand, there's an orange in my hand. And I couldn't make anything happen. And we came out of the meditation, I was still just sitting here like this, and this person came in from the other room and put an orange in my hands. It was like, I go, close. But that is kind of how it is. You see, it starts out where we don't think that there's any connection at all. And then the second level that begins to happen is coincidence, which is that would fall under coincidence level. You know, like you're thinking, gee, I'd really like to have a certain bottle of wine or something like that, and somebody walks in with the very year you're thinking of, these kinds of things. Or you're thinking of somebody and they walk through the door. Only when the coincidence level really starts happening, it starts happening a lot. I'm sure many of you have probably experienced this. It just sort of starts happening all the time. Because that's a level of manifestation that you can accept. Because it all has to do with your belief patterns and what you can accept and what you can't accept. And later, the ones that we're talking about now is where you go directly into it, where you directly manifest the orange, or you don't turn the water into, you don't go have the wine bottle come in, you take water and turn to wine, or a molecular construction, transformation, or whatever. There are higher levels than that of understanding, but you know, the level of turning water into wine, for example, is a lower level than turning nothing into wine. Not even turning one molecule into another is easier to do than to have something appear out of nowhere. But it's still all interrelated phenomena. And so this was my experience, and you can take it from what you want. It began, remember the little guy that my alchemist teacher turned into this little guy, Thoth, many, many years before. I talked about my Wolf Chipman. He turned into the alchemist teacher. Didn't I say that in the beginning part? Well, many years went by, I didn't see him. And after a while, I kind of forgot, but I never forgot his eyes. And I just sort of remembered him, but never, didn't think about him very much anymore. Many years went by, 1, 2, 5, 10, finally 12 years went by. And one day, the angels came in and they said that I needed to read the Emerald Tablets. And I never heard of the Emerald Tablets before. I didn't even know what they were talking about. And so I said, well, what's the Emerald Tablets? And they just looked at me and they said, you'll find out. And they left. And so I went out to try to buy the Emerald Tablets. And I went into bookstores and all these kinds of things everywhere. And nobody knew what I was talking about. This was back in, October of 1984. And So I exhausted all my possibilities of trying to find these things and couldn't find them. And so I just figured, well, I'll just leave it up to God. If I'm supposed to read the Emerald Tablets, they'll fall out of the sky or something. And about 2 weeks after they told me that, I was at the El Prado post office in New Mexico, and I was just got my mail, and I went outside, and there was a friend I hadn't seen there for about a year or so, or maybe longer. I drove up in this car, and she said hi, and I said hi, and I went over to her to talk to her, and we're just talking because I hadn't seen her for about a year. And in the course of conversation, she was still sitting in the car, and I was standing outside. She sort of reaches over and grabs this little book and hands it to me and says, "Hey, have you ever read these things?" And I look at it and it says, "The Emerald Tablets." And I said, so she loaned them to me, and I went home. And the first thing, I started reading these tablets, and they had a very powerful effect on me almost immediately. And somewhere in there, I can't remember, it was about the 4th tablet, I think. It says in there, it says it was written by Thoth the Atlantean. And I really didn't know who Thoth was. I had read a fair amount about Egypt, but I had not tuned into this person before. I didn't really know who it was when I was reading the books. And anyway, it says if you want to contact me, here's how you do it. And it just says to repeat his name 3 times, which is Chikitet Arlich Fomalites. And so I sat down in meditation and decided it was okay because the angels told me to do this, so I assumed I had permission to do these kind of things. And so I sat down and I went in. I knew that it meant to go, even though it didn't say it, I knew what it meant. And so I got into very deep meditation, and I sat for a long time until I felt very, very still. And then I had my eyes closed, and I repeated his name out into the ethers. Excuse me. And then I waited. And nothing happened. I waited for a long time. It was maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes or so, and absolutely nothing happened. And so I opened my eyes because I was just going to come back out of the meditation, get up and go do something else. But when I opened my eyes, there was a very definite object in front of me, the likes of which I did not know what it was because I'd never seen anything quite like this before. And it didn't fit into anything I'd ever read or anything. It was a kind of hovering off the, or barely, I don't know if it was hovering off the ground or if it was resting on the ground or not, but it was a very big egg-shaped golden field. It was maybe this wide and maybe, I don't know, 4 feet or so high, and it looked very much or exactly like an egg, except that it was kind of a shimmering gold translucent light. And it was very powerful. I mean, you could see through it, but it would be pretty hard to miss it. And it was about 3 or 4 feet in front of me. I'm just sitting there cross-legged. And I'm just sitting there looking at this thing, completely forgetting that I had tried to get this guy Thoth to come out. I totally forgot about that. I'm just sitting there going, this is weird. What is this thing, you know, just totally in another world thinking about this. And I'm sitting there looking at it, and I looked at it for about 3 or 4 minutes trying to figure out what it was, when suddenly something happened where my back went really straight. I mean, I didn't do it. My back just went straight on its own, which was kind of a funny feeling. And my arms went up in the air like this, and I started going like this. And I wasn't doing this, and I was going, this is weird. But my head, when my head would go from 180 degrees, after a while I'd try to get a quick look in at this egg, because I knew it had something to do with me doing this. And when my head would go this way where I could see it for a moment, the egg started getting less and less, more and more transparent, and there was somebody in there doing the same thing that I was doing, only when I would look that way, this person would look that way, and then our heads would look like this. And I didn't know what was going on, but I was just going to go along with this thing, whatever it was, because I didn't know what else was happening. And pretty soon the egg thing is gone, and then it sort of went away, and I put my arms down, and here's this little old man sitting on my bed, and looking at me. And it was the same guy from 12 years earlier. And inside of my head, I said to him, "Oh, it's you. Oh, great!" You know, because I really liked him. I always wanted to see this guy again. And then I realized, oh, that's who Thoth is. That's who this person is. But he didn't say anything to me at all. He didn't answer me back. I was talking to him telepathically, but there was nothing. And it was a little different. Like the first time when he appeared, my alchemist teacher appeared, I could not resist. I reached over and touched him because he looked real and he was solid. But this time, he was ever so slightly transparent. I didn't have to reach over. I knew that he wasn't like solidly there, but he was real clearly sitting there. And so after a while, or a few seconds, I realized that he didn't want to talk. He just wanted to look. And so I just looked back. I didn't know what else to do, so we just looked at each other for a while. And then after a while, the egg kind of appeared around him, and then it just went away, and he was gone. And I got real excited after that, because something new was happening here. And I liked this guy, and I wanted, and it was real good. And so I got to remember all the sequences here because it's a little complex. Soon after that, this friend of mine, Jenny Bird, who's a singer around Taos, she came up to me and gave me an emerald crystal, a raw, natural emerald crystal, just out of the blue. Said it would be like an emerald. So I looked at it and I thought, well, everything comes for a reason. So I went back to where I would meditate, and I sat down. And to me, crystals are alive. I mean, they're living beings. And I learned a long time ago how to communicate with them. And so I sat in there and I put it up. I don't remember if I held it this way or to my head. I don't remember, but I connected with it. And I asked it what it knew about the emerald tablets. And all it would say over and over and over again was, the emerald tablets are not made out of emerald. That was it. And after about 5 minutes of that, I decided this broken record here. And I took it back down. I wouldn't say anymore, just the emerald tablets are not made out of emerald. And just to kind of a little side thing on this thing about crystals, to me, they're real easy to communicate with. They're very easy. And once you open to it, I used to give classes on crystals a long time ago. And one day I was in a crystal class in San Francisco to about 30 people. And we were sitting in a big circle, and I was pulling out all my crystals and talking about each one. And I was saying the same thing, that crystals are alive. And somebody said, well, can you show me that they're alive? So I never know if I can or I can't. You know, I don't know what it's up to God. And so I thought for a moment, and I said, well, I don't know. And then this idea popped in my head, and I passed, everybody had a piece of paper and a pencil. And I said, okay, somebody put a crystal out in the middle. And so somebody just put a crystal out in the middle, just one at random. Before anybody could look at it, I got my hands on it, or even any kind of thing like that. It says, okay, nobody's going to look at the crystal. All you're going to do is just take it, put it to your forehead. You got 2 seconds. Whatever the first place that comes to your mind where this crystal came from, just listen. Just the first place it is, take it down, hand it to the next person, write it on a piece of paper and fold it up. And so it went around the whole place. Nobody got to sit there and study the crystal or anything else like that. Just like this. And then all at once we opened up. I didn't know if it was going to work, right? We all opened up. And every single person in the room had exactly the same place, which was Brazil. Every single person. And that was... But that's just a simple one. I know from a lot of other ways that communication level with crystals is really, really, really easy and very accurate. So anyway, I ended up giving that back to Jenny. And a little while later, I was in a crystal store. This is now about November. The first time the day that it was introduced to Thoth was November 1st, 1984. The rest of the story is going to go until January 19th, 1985. So this is the span of time that this is in. And so this would have been a few days after November 1st. I was in a store and I saw a twined quartz crystal, which is just two crystals that are like that. There's a twined quartz. When the crystals are formed, they make what is called a mistake, which forms the second one. The crystal, I don't know if you guys know how crystals are formed, but it's really based a lot on vortex energy and the flower of life patterns. That crystals are, silicon is a tetrahedron, and the silicon thing fixes together and makes a star tetrahedron, which is a cube, and then it makes a whole array of these cubes along a straight line, and then it spins very, very fast and stops at the 6 points of the flower of life and goes up like this and forms itself. And if it spins one way, it's male, and if it spins the other way, it's female, and some of them spin counter-rotating when they do it, which are both male and female. And you can look at the windows and tell if a crystal is male or female. Start with the lowest window, and the next highest window will either go this way, and if it does, the next one will be higher, and the next one will be higher, and the next one will be higher, and you can see the rotational energy going counterclockwise, and that's a male. The next window is over on this side, the next one will be there, and it'll go up like that, that's a female. And then some of them will have a low window with two equal windows going up like this, where it had a double pattern. Anyway, I had this little twined quartz, and it was an extraordinary crystal. I had never seen anything quite like this crystal ever before. It had a face on it that was a perfect octagon, like a stop sign. I've seen 3-sided, 4-sided, 5-sided, 6-sided, 7-sided, and 9-sided faces, but I've never, ever, ever, ever seen an 8-sided face on a crystal before. And I couldn't stand it. I had to buy it. So I bought it. I went home with it. And I sat down with this crystal, and I don't think I'm going to tell the whole story in this because it's not really, really important. But this crystal gave me a 2-hour-long, one of the most incredible visions I'd ever seen in my life. It was just nothing like that had ever occurred. And it was like not an Nefertiti had programmed into this thing. And their voices came through. She led me through Egypt, and it was this amazing thing. I didn't know what was going on. Still don't know why it all happened or anything, but it was a very, very powerful experience. But at the very end, Nefertiti led me through all these temples with this crystal. And the very final scene was the sun going down and the Sphinx, which was inside of the Great Pyramid looking out. And the next night, I decided to see if I could get Thoth back again. And I felt this urge to do this. And so I repeated his name. This time I left my eyes open. The egg appeared. This whole stuff went on again. And there he is in the bed again. Only this time he's ready to talk. And Thoth is very direct. There's no small talk ever with this guy. It's not true with his wife. She'll sit there and talk with you, but not Thoth. He's right to the point. And he comes up and he goes, the dream you had last night, which is where I went off. Oh, I didn't tell you about that part. There's one thing in the middle. Right after I had that crystal where I went all over there, right after that I had this dream. And in the dream, it was one of these really real dreams that we all have, you know, every once in a while, super technicolor, remembering every moment in it. And in the dream, there was a small group of people that came to me, and we went into Egypt, and we went through this initiation through all these temples in there. And until the crystal that had happened right before then, I had really not even thought about Egypt that much. I mean, it was not, though I'd read about it and things like that, I had not contemplated going to Egypt or thinking along those kinds of lines at all. But in this dream, we were going there, and we were going through all these temples, and all these initiations were taking place. And then the dream seemed to have like this hesitation place for a while. And then I'm going through more pyramids and temples, but I couldn't figure out where I was. And through the whole dream I'm going, where am I? Where am I? And finally I just asked, where am I? And I got the answer, you're in Peru. And I mean, and I'll tell you, Peru is like the last place, well maybe not the last, but pretty close to the last place I'd have ever thought of going. And then there was this other place, separation. I'm going through more pyramids and realized that I was in the Yucatan. And so then when I went and got Thoth back in the second time he came in, and he starts telling me, he says, the dream that you just had, which was the night before, I believe it was the night before, the dream you just had will begin, will happen, the whole thing, but only if it begins. And I said, well, what do you mean if it begins? And he said, well, by that I mean it has to begin in Egypt, but you can't do anything to make it happen. The dream must happen on its own. It must begin on its own, without you doing anything. He clarified it. I couldn't tell anybody. I couldn't go buy a ticket. I couldn't do anything at all. It was like, hold this thought into my mind, into my heart, and do nothing. And just end up there. And then he left. And after he left, I was thinking, well, this is a real easy one. I just don't have to do a thing. I just sit here, and somehow some hijackers are going to come along, put me in a trunk and take me to Egypt, I guess. I didn't know what it was going to happen. I couldn't conceive of how that could possibly happen. I couldn't conceive of a way that it could happen. But I figured, well, it's up to God. Anything's possible. But I couldn't figure out how it could be possible. And a few days later, I had already made arrangements to go see my parents in California and in the Bay Area. And so I went there. I was going to go there for 10 days. And I went there to see them. And at the end of the 10 days, it was the 9th day, my sister Nita was just returning from China. And I really love my sister Nita a lot. I've got 4 sisters and a brother, and the rest of them I don't even see them. But my sister Nita and I are real close. And she was actually my mother in my last lifetime. She knows that I know it, and we just have a real close relationship. And so I wanted to go see her, and so on the 9th day, or 9th night, I went over to see her, and we got talking all night. She's a real interesting person. She has been traveling about 10 or 11 months out of every year for about the last 45 years, non-stop. She had a map on the wall one time, a long time ago, where she put a little pin on every city she's been in. The whole world was just... There wasn't hardly anywhere. Every city is usually like 15, 20, 30, 40 times she's been in. Everywhere. There's nowhere she hasn't been. I remember this one time when she was sitting in a room with some friends, and this guy came in who was another world traveler, and they sat down and tried to find a place that one had not been to. And the hours went by. They were going on like 2 hours later. And one would say, well, have you been to da-da-da? Yeah. Well, have you been to da-da-da? I come back an hour later and they say, well, have you been to da-da-da? And finally, at the very end, I was listening to this, and they said, and my sister's going, okay. You go down the Amazon and down this stuff like that. And he goes, yeah. And he says, go down there, and you know where this da-da-da is? And he goes, yeah. He says, and you know this little thing that goes up that way? And he goes, yeah. And she goes way up there to some place up there, and he'd never been there. And it was like, she finally got him. Anyway, she had just come back from China, and I was sitting in the room with her, talking to her about spiritual things. That's mostly what she wants to talk about. And though I did not tell her anything about what was going on with me relative to this new thing that was happening, I was told not to. And sometime about 1 o'clock in the evening, we're still going on, and she had a copy of The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall that was sitting on the table, and she just flips it open. Casually, as she's talking about some other subject, she flips it open, and there's a cross-section, like we saw up there, of the Great Pyramid. And the conversation gets switched to Egypt. And she starts telling me about one of her adventures over there in Egypt. And so I'm just listening to her on all this. And right in the middle of the conversation, she stops and she looks at me and she goes, "You've never been to Egypt, have you?" I go, "Me?" "No." She goes, "Wow. Gee, you really need to go to Egypt," she says. "If you ever want to go, just let me know. I'll pay for everything. I'll just totally pay for the whole trip for you." And I kept my mouth real closed, and I said, "Okay." I didn't say anything. I knew that I could not say anything. And so I went on home the next morning. I got home that next evening, and I set my bags down, and the first thing I do when I get off of a plane is I sit down and I center from all that stuff and everything. And I sit down and meditate for a little bit, and I open my eyes, and Thoth's sitting on my bed. None of this stuff, no things, no nothing. He's just sitting on my bed. He's got my number now. And he immediately goes right to the point. He goes, doesn't say hello or anything. He goes, he got better after a few years, he got better. He says, "That's how you're going to Egypt." I said, "How?" And he said, "Your sister. You call her tomorrow morning, tell her that you want to go to Egypt, and you want to go between January 10th and January 19th, which is, we're talking about, this is like toward the end of November, so we're talking about 5-6 weeks away." And so when he said that, it made perfect sense. And I said, "Oh, okay." And then he leaves. And then after he left, I started thinking. And as more I started thinking, I started feeling funnier and funnier, because I knew what my sister meant when she told me this. She didn't mean that she would take me in 5 or 6 weeks. She meant, someday down the line, someday she would take me to Egypt. And he told me to call him the first thing in the morning, so that next morning when I woke up, I was sitting there with my hand on the phone for like a half an hour. I couldn't lift it up off the cradle because I felt like I was really imposing here, but at the same time I knew I had to do what the higher guidance was telling me to do, but I finally got the guts and said, "You got to do it, you got to do it." All right. Lift the phone up and I said, "Dial the number." And I told her, I said, "You got on the phone?" I says, real quickly, "Well, remember you said you would take me to Egypt?" And she goes, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I'd really like to go right away to January 10th through January 19th. And she goes, "Well," she says, "I don't think that we can do that." She says, "As far as I can remember," she traveled so much she eventually bought a travel agency. And they have stuff where she had the largest travel agency in California. I think there was 22 people that just booked flights all the time, and which was also booking hers. She would take groups around a lot. That's how she made her money. And she goes, I don't think I can. So I don't think I can do that until. She said, I think I'm booked all the way through September of 1980 of this year, or next year, 1984. She says, I don't think I can do that. She says, but I'll call you back when I get. I called her at home, and she says, I'll call you when I get to the office, and I'll look at anything. But she says, I don't think I can do that. That's how she left it. She says, but I'll take you. She says, in October, November, later this year, we can go. I said, well, okay. And she left, and so it looked like it wasn't going to happen. About an hour or two later, she calls me back up, and she goes, well, I'm not only booked through September, I'm now booked all the way through October 1984, every single day. She says, except for January 10th through January 19th. She says, when I looked in the book, it was solid mass ink things on either side, and those days were blank. There's not even one word written in them. She says, I think something like, I think you've really tuned into something here. We're really supposed to do this. You know? And I said, yeah, I think we are. And then she calls up TWA. She used to bring the ARE groups over there, anywhere from 100 to 700 people at a time, over to Egypt all the time. And so when she called them up for the tickets to go to Egypt, she knew the guy that was booking the tickets. And she says, oh, I want a ticket for me and my brother to go to Egypt. He goes, you and your brother? He says, well, you brought so many people over there, we'll just give it to you for free. So TWA flew both of us over there and back for nothing. It's great. Even TWA was on our side. And so we then began to prepare. I don't remember if this was the exact order or not, but Thoth came in and said that I had to go through a training and that he would help me, and he spent a couple of weeks or more with me, a lot each day. He gave me an itinerary of where I had to go. I had to start at Luxor, Temple of Man, and then go to the Temple of Dreams, like I told you. And then from there was a whole itinerary of places running all the way up the Nile and to Saqqara, and then finally the very last place was into that little room or that tunnel underneath in the Great Pyramid. And he told me that I had to go in precisely that order, that if there was even one deviation or one change, just to go home. Forget it. It's all over. Everything. The whole thing's over with. And then he said I had to do a training. I did 2 basic trainings. The first one, which was ongoing, which took a long time, was for each one of these itinerary in each one of these temples, I had to go to a certain place in each one of these temples, and I had to repeat certain Atlantean sounds and words and paragraphs. And so I had to learn how to speak Atlantean. And it was hard. And so he would give me a sound or a series of words that I'd have to say, and I'd have to keep repeating them over and over and over until I got them just the way that he wanted me to say them. And then I would write them out phonetically on paper so I could try to remember. And then when he would come back in, he would have me keep repeating them. I had to get them just right. I mean, sometimes they sounded exactly what he was saying, but it wasn't good enough for him. It had to be just right. So that was one of the things that kept going. And then the other one, he told me what I just told you, that where I was going into was a fourth dimensional space connected to the halls of Amente, and that I couldn't have any fears, that I could get hurt in this place if I had any fears. And that, so he gave me a training. He said I would do fine on the fears, but he gave me a training which is talked about in the Emerald Tablets, but it's another thing about talking about than actually doing it and everything, which is you make these, they can either be blue or gold, But you make these psychic blue rings around you, and you can do them either in one or in sets of 3, I think it was. They're like neon lights around your body. Let me explain something. If you experience fear, you move these rings up and down your body from foot to head in such a way, you do them in such a way, it will tell you if it's a real fear that you're experiencing or if it's paranoia. Number 1. And if it is real fear, then there is a certain rhythm of the rings that will eliminate the fear so you can deal with the problem. And if it's paranoia, there's another rhythm of the rings that'll just make the fear go away so you can keep going on. And so that was part of my training. And so while I was doing all of that, I'm still going through all of this. At one point I realized that my emerald tablets had a couple missing pages because this is an old beat-up copy. And in my mind I was wishing I had a full set of them. And I was also, in my mind, I didn't express this to anyone, but in my mind I was wishing that I'd also had a set for my sister. And something I haven't told you, in the meantime I had a friend, his name was Sananda Ra, who found out I was going to Egypt and said he wanted to come with me. And I asked, and they said yes, and so he was allowed to go. And then he came back and said he wanted to bring his brother with him, so I asked, let his brother come with him. Then he said he had a girlfriend and he wanted to come. So I asked, and she could come too. So we ended up being 5 of us all together. It was myself, my sister, Sananda, his name was Jake, and this woman who was a follower of Yogi Bhajan, who was a Sikh, who at that time was somebody Singh, I can't remember, but later changed her name and became known as Katrina Raphael. That was her. It was before she was Katrina. And so I was also wishing that I had, by this time I knew those 3 were coming, and I was wishing that I had another book to give to them so that they could think about it too. I was wanting 3 books. And also in all of this, the angels were coming in and out all the time through this whole thing. But at one point they came in and they said, you're about to go on a trip for 3 days. Pack. And then they left. They didn't tell me where I was going. And this was December. So I went through a lot, I'll tell you. I was like, well? Have you ever tried to pack for anywhere in the world? I didn't know, so I packed this bag with everything from shorts to down jackets to everything you can think of, and I had it all crammed into this thing, with every conceivable thing I could think of, enough for 3 days. And then sat around and wondered where I was going. And about a very short time later, I don't remember what it was, 2 or 3 days later, Sananda comes up. He just bought a brand new white Jeep. And he comes up and he says, pulls up to my house, and I was sitting there on the porch, and he says, I just got another job down in Tucson, Arizona, and I got to go down there for 3 days. He says, would you want to come? I knew it was the thing. And I said, yeah. So I just picked up this bag and sit in his car. He looks at me. So we went over to his house and packed his clothes. And went to Tucson. And what happened on that trip was truly an incredible story. I can't tell you the story. It's too long. It's beautiful. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing story. And we went into the 4th dimension on Earth for about 3, little over 3 days. And it was one miracle after another. I've never seen anything like it. Well, maybe I have, but not. It's been a long time. But in those 3 days, we went to this person's house, and in a very short period of time, I just remembered part of that. Wow.
Tell it.
Well, it was just this woman who appeared in the room. She was a real woman. I watched her appear right in the room, holding these owl feathers, and she gave me this is not part of the story, and she gave me the two wings of this owl, and when we were leaving, when we were leaving and coming out, this is right at the end as we were coming back into the third dimension, basically. We were driving down the road, and there was this owl circling right over our car as we were going. This is during the middle of the day. It's like 11 o'clock. And then we went just a little bit further, and there was this owl sitting beside the road. And we stopped and backed up. It was just sitting there, only it had just died. It was still warm. And I looked at this owl, and I took the feathers out, the wings out, and it was identical. It was absolutely identical. It was the same one. And the bird told me to take its wings and its feet and to put it into the bushes, which I did. And the spirit of the owl came to me at that point. That was one of the birds that was one of my power birds that was with me. And after that, every mile, for 5 more miles, there was one of the owls circling and always leading this out. And every time we went under one of these owls, I could feel us coming back, and coming back. And by the time we got past the 7th owl, we were just driving down a car on a road again. It was all over, but I can't tell you the rest of the story because it was too much. And but birds have been very, very close to me all my life. The hummingbird, which has been leading or carefully helping me with this work that I'm doing now. The way the hummingbird came to me was I was in a building, and there had been a little tiny opening over in one edge of the building where there was some construction doing, only about this big. And when I came into the room, there had been a hummingbird in the room that was flying, darting all over. And it kept hitting the windows and going around, and I just stood very still in the room and waited until it finally landed on the ledge. And then I went over to it when it was about 3 feet away, and in my mind, I told it that everything was okay, and I just held my finger up and said, "If you'll come over and land on my finger, I'll take you out." And the bird turned around and it looked at me, and it just flew over and landed on my finger. And then I walked about 30 feet over to where the little hole was, and I let it go. And the next morning when I came in to my desk, which was over there, the little bird was laying on my desk dead. But I don't know if you understand what, see, the birds, death is nothing to birds. It's nothing. They can get out real easy. And the bird, that was the bird's way of telling me thank you. And it made this really powerful connection with me also. And so I've been with it. But there are several. There's the red-tailed hawk also, which is made, and the crow and the eagle. They've all helped me a lot in all of it. But I got to get back to the story. While we were there, I went to this person's house, and somehow, I don't remember the conversation, but the emerald tablets were mentioned. And I said to the person, "You know about them?" And he was kind of bragging. He said, "Oh yeah, I know about them. I even know the person who released them to the world." And I said, "Really?" And he says, "Yeah." He says, "Would you like to meet her?" And that was too much, you know. Yeah. And he says, "Well, let me call her up." So he gets on the phone, he calls her up, and her name is Angelique. And he says, "Can they come over?" And she says, "Absolutely, right now. Come right now," she says. So I hang up the phone, we just go get this brand new white Jeep, and we drive over to this kind of this old Victorian house. And we walk into this house, and there's this huge living room. I mean, you know, some of these old Victorian houses, these big old living rooms. And it was a little dark, and there was kind of plants a lot all over the place. And this woman was sitting at the far end of this room, way at the end, it's like 30 feet on the other side of the room, over in this room, in this chair, facing the door as we came in. And it's just about maybe 35 or 6 or 7 or something like that. And she motions for us to come over, so I'm walking over across. I get about halfway over there, and she scolds me. She goes, "I've been waiting for you for 6 months." Like this. I go, "Well, I just got here." And so I just keep walking up, and she's got a little table sitting over here, and sitting on the table are 3 copies of the Emerald Tablets. And she reaches over and says, "Here," and hands them to me. And here I'm sitting with 3 copies, and I'm thinking, that's just what I need. And she goes, "You were supposed to have been here a long time ago." And I said, "Well," I just found out about you just a little while ago. And there was an angel that has led her through all this, who told her 6 months earlier that I was coming. I guess the angel didn't say clearly when. And she had been expecting me all this time. And she said that the angel had told her that I could ask her any questions that she wanted to know about the Emerald Tablets that she could answer. And so I asked all these questions, all kinds of things that I wanted to know about them, and she just fired the answers right away. And she said this one of my questions were, toward the end of the whole thing, I said, how did you get these? How did they come to you? And she told me this story, which would make a great movie, an Indiana Jones type movie. She said, and I'm going to not tell all the details because I've got a lot to go on this other story. I'm going to go pretty quick on it. She said that there was this couple, this married couple from L.A., went to the Yucatan, and they were looking at the temples and pyramids and things in the Yucatan, and they got separated, and the female got lost in the Yucatan jungle. And the male made it back, but the female didn't. And so she went walking through this jungle all day long and got lost and didn't happen to spend the night there out in the middle of nowhere. And went another whole day and spent another night and went another whole day. It was 3 nights, so it must have been on the 4th day that she finally got up onto this little hill where she could kind of see around. And as she did, she could look down into this valley and see this Mayan village. They make these kind of, I don't know if it's adobe or what that is. I'm not sure what that is. I've seen these buildings myself, but anyway, they have grass thatch roofs type on them. And and there was a trail that led down to it. She could see where the trail led down to it. And so she said, civilization, somebody, people. And she started to walk down there. I think I have this right now. The first thing she did, she stepped with her right foot. Right, left, right. I think I'm correct in this. She took her right foot and started to take a step to go down the trail, and a snake went from left to right underneath her foot. And she obviously pulled her foot right back. And she started to take another step, and another snake went from right to left underneath her foot, and she pulled it back. And she started to take another step, and another snake went from left to right underneath her foot. And she pulled it back, and as she went back like this huge butterfly flapped in her face. And I guess the combination of these 3 snakes and this butterfly freaked her out, which probably would few people. And she just started screaming and running down this trail, all the way down into this village, running right into the village, right into the grass hut, and right into the arms of the chief of the village, who happened to be standing there. And there was a lot of some older men sitting around inside this kind of darkened little hut. And he looks at her and calms her down and everything. She was kind of hysterical, and he calms her down and he says to her, they spoke in Spanish. It was the common language that they had. And he says to her, "What's wrong? You know, why are you all excited? What scared you?" And she starts describing these 3 snakes and this big butterfly up there that freaked her out. And when she described how they went back this way and this way and this way and all this stuff, and the butterfly and all stuff like that, all the men stood up. And they came and they circled around her. Because you see, when the emerald tablets were placed in the hands of the Mayan Indians by Thoth a long, long, long time ago, no, that's not exactly correct. The emerald tablets were brought there by Thoth a long, long, long time ago and given to this tribe. Durrell in 1925, which was part of the White Brotherhood, was directed to go there and to interpret the emerald tablets so that someday we would read them. In his instructions, he interpreted the emerald tablets. At that point, 10 of them went back to the halls of Mente and 2 of them stayed there. And the interpretation, once it was written down, was then given to a young, very young couple in New York City. And they were told to keep this copy of this book and to never give it to anyone, to never let anyone copy it, to never let anyone take photographs of it or any kind of thing like that, and to keep it for the rest of their life. That was their instructions. Meanwhile, Durrell gives to this Indian tribe a piece of paper. And on the piece of paper is the address of this couple. And then Durrell tells them that someday there would be this white woman that would be known by the 3 snakes and the butterfly. And when they saw her, they were to take her and to bring her to this cave, which they did, and to bring her in there, and there was a ceremony that she was to go through, which would take 30 days. And she had no food for 30 days, only water. And whatever this ceremony was, and the whole experience of being in the jungle for 4 days, and the snakes and the whole thing, she wasn't quite the same person after she got done. And it awakened her to her purpose, whatever that was, real quickly. And when they were done with her, they gave her this little piece of paper and told her to go there and get this interpretation. She knew what it was by then. To get this interpretation from these people in any way that she could. So they had the job of making sure that no one got it, and she had the job to make sure that she got it away. And but they had been keeping this since 1925 or 6 or 7 or something like that. They had had this thing over there all the way up until about 1980. I guess it was about 6 years before that, so we're talking about 1978 or something like that when this took place. It was a long time, so these were probably pretty old people by the time she was there. Anyway, she took a little piece of paper and they told her how to get out. She went back to LA and she broke the relationship off with her husband. I don't know what that was about. And then she went to New York. And when she got to New York, she went straight to the address, and she was still, as Angelique tried to describe this, kind of jungle-fied, you know, not so clean and everything, and went to this apartment, and they just took one look at her and slammed the door and locked it and wouldn't even let her in. And she went back out and realized the situation, so she went back to wherever she was, and she cleaned up, and she bought some clothes, and changed the whole appearance and went back. Those people did not even know it was the same person. Didn't even have any idea. It was somebody totally different. And so she was so nice looking, they let her in, and they started talking, and she started saying that she knew that there was this interpretation and she could see it. Well, it was okay for them to see it, it just could never leave the apartment, so they let her see this thing, but she couldn't copy it or photograph it or any other kinds of things like this. So she was looking at it and seeing the whole thing like that. And then she did something like asked for some tea or something else like that. And when they got up, anyway, the 2 of them she was sitting there with the book, and the door was right there, and they got away from her a little bit. She just picked the book up and ran. And that's how she got it. And she got outside and then was instructed somehow, and I don't know what her communication was, whether it was still with the Mayans or higher level, I don't know what it was. She was instructed to go to Globe, Arizona, and then directly to a very specific address, and she just went there and gave it to Angelique. Angelique knew in advance that this woman was coming from her angel and was waiting there for her to give it to her. And then the angels for a long time told Angelique who could have it and who couldn't have it. This is in the very, very beginning stages. And then at one point, the Great White Brotherhood, the Brotherhood of the White Temple in Colorado realized that what had happened in some way, I don't know how, and then they released it also out to the whole thing. This is a story. So anyway, I got 3 copies, and I went back and I gave one to my sister, and I gave one to Sananda, and I kept one. And so we're ready to go, you know. I mean, everything's all ready. I learned all my words. I'd figured out how to do these ring things, and I felt ready in my heart to do this, whatever it was, and everybody else felt like they were ready. I wasn't so sure of Jake, but everybody else was ready. But Jake ended up being fine. He did okay. And so we took off. I'll never forget flying right over the Great Pyramids as we came in and landing down on them, landing down on the airport. We were greeted by Ahmed Fahed, who is the #1 Egyptian archaeologist in the world and the #1 Egyptian archaeologist of the Egyptian government. He works for the government. He got that position because of his father. And we didn't have to go through customs, nothing, except they stamped. He just took us right past all the lines, went up the thing, took our books. He says, stamp them. They stamp them. He takes us right straight out and got in a taxi cab. Nobody even looked at our bags or nothing. They just got in there and left. And he took us straight home to his house. And his house is it's an apartment building that is about 6 stories high, and is probably, like an apartment building, man. It's his house, and it looks directly into the Sphinx. It's the closest building looking straight into the Sphinx. And this was a real good friend of my sister's. That's why he was the one that did it. He was connected with the ARE, and so was my sister. They became friends at one point. And anyway, he gave us a room there and everything. And I got to tell you one thing about this guy's father. This is kind of important to know. This is the kind of information that Egypt will not tell you about. Egypt holds most of this information very secret. And when things happen, you're not going to hear it. I mean, I know so many things that go over there. You wouldn't believe some of these things that are going on, and yet they're really happening. They're not going to tell you. But this truly happened. There's absolutely no doubt about what I'm about to say. Ahmed's father, when he was 12 years old, he had a dream. He had a dream that there was a wooden boat that was 120 feet long. The boat, the celestial boat that takes the Egyptians from one world to the next. There's this long boat, and that it sat approximately 60 feet off of the western side, I think it was, of the Great Pyramid, and so many feet down. He drew a picture of the boat, and the boat was so authentic in so many ways, including even all the hieroglyphics and everything, that the government, upon seeing this, decided that they would actually check to see if there really was something there. And so they drilled this hole, and sure enough, there's really a boat down there. And they go down in there and they take the boat out. The only thing is the boat is in pieces. And so the Egyptian government tries for 2 years to put the boat together and can't figure it out. So now the kid's 14 years old and he has another dream. And the dream is the blueprint of exactly how to put the boat together. And so with the blueprint, the government takes the blueprint and the boat, and all the pieces fit together, and this beautiful 120-foot long wooden boat appears. Of course, wood won't keep very, very long, so they had to build this special room, which now sits, I think, off the southern face, I believe, of the Great Pyramid. There's this modernistic room that's all glass and everything else like that, with this big boat in it, which sits there right now. But that's how it got there. He then told them that there's another one on the other side. They drilled a hole, and sure enough, there was another one on the other side, but they didn't want to build one of those big fancy rooms again, so they filled up the hole, and they just left it there. At this point, this kid had a lot of credibility with the Egyptian government. And so when he started telling them that there was an underground city out in the middle of the desert, they listened to him. And he took them to a place that's now called Memphis. At the time, there was nothing there but a few little houses scattered around. And he said, there's a vast ancient city here under the ground. Let me show you where some of the buildings are. And he went to this one spot, and he drew this detailed photograph almost of this building. And he would come like this, and he would draw a piece in the sand, and he says, this is the corner of the building, right where he drew the line. And they would dig down there, and that would be exactly the corner of that building. And they would undo it, and the picture and the thing was exactly the same. The guy was a good psychic, man. And he would then say, there's this thing running over there, and they'd dig it up, and it would be there, and he'd say, this is over there, and this building's here, and this is here, and this is here. And every time, he was never wrong on anything, ever. It was 100% perfect. And he unfolded all of Memphis. He was the one who did it. And so he began to tell them all kinds of things about Egypt all over the place. And he knows where everything is. Things that we don't know about yet. Things that, and he's told me things, certain things that I know are there. And I promise we can't talk about it. But what you see above ground is only part of what's really there. There's a lot more there. And just for another example, and these are only ones that I can really talk about, some of them, but they're all documented. This is all documented stuff. The middle pyramid, the Great Pyramid, they broke into, they drilled into it, they smashed into it, that's how they got in. But that's not how they got into the middle pyramid. The middle pyramid went to, his name is Muhammad Fahed. He's about 85 or 90 years old right now. He sits around and plays backgammon all the time at this point. And he wears these long Egyptian robes and everything. And they went to him and they said, Muhammad, can we get into the middle pyramid, please? And he finally said, yes, I guess so. And so he sat in front of the north face of the middle pyramid. There are, again, about 2.5 million blocks in that pyramid. The government said that they would remove one of them, just one. So he had to be right on the first guess, if it's a guess. And so he sat cross-legged in front of the north face of this pyramid for 5 hours, and then said, that one. And they climbed up about a third of the way up this pyramid and went to this one certain block, carefully removed this one block, and that was the doorway into the tunnel. That's how they got in. So it was his son that we were with. This is why the ARE likes him so much, because he knows a lot about his father and him and his whole family know what's in Egypt and all that stuff. And so anyway, I get in there and Ahmed says to my sister, well, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? He would take her anywhere, whatever she wanted to do. He can get her in anywhere. And he says, whatever you want to do. And she says, well, whatever. My name was Akbar then. And he says, well, whatever Akbar wants to do. I was involved in Sufi work for many, many, many years, about 11 years. And so he says, okay, well, what do you want to do? And so I handed him the itinerary that I had written down on all the places that I need to go. I need to start in Luxor and all these other things like this. This would have been on January, we came in on January 10th, I think it was, so it was probably, would have been on the evening of January 10th, so when we first arrived. And so I gave him the thing, and I said, well, this is what I'd like to do. And he says, okay, and he looks at the whole thing, and he thinks about it for a little bit, and he comes back and he goes, this is not very good. This isn't, this won't work real well. He says, you're only going to be here for 9 days or whatever it is, and which isn't very long. And I mean, he's being really nice. He's trying to convince me to do something else other than that itinerary. And he says that we couldn't leave if you want to start in Luxor, we couldn't leave in Luxor until tomorrow evening because the train doesn't leave until 6 o'clock. There's a French train that goes down there. It's a French-made train at 6 o'clock. And it's the only way to get down there and right now. And so we would just sit around all day long. He says, why don't we go to the Sphinx tomorrow morning, I'll take you to Saqqara, and we can go to the Great Pyramid and all these things because it's right here. And then tomorrow at 6 o'clock we'll go down to Luxor. And I knew that if I did that, I might as well go home, right? And so I tried to convince him that I didn't want to do this, that I really wanted to start exactly by that thing. But he wouldn't listen. He just says, no, 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 this is much better. Listen to me. I know what I'm doing. And he just kept pushing it, and I mean, we only went around and around for about 10 minutes, and I realized he wasn't going to give up easy, that was for sure. And I have, though I've been involved in Sufi work for a long time, my inner belief is much more closely associated with Taoism than anything else. And I did not believe that force should be necessary for something of this nature. And so I surrendered to it, and I said, okay, because if it was supposed to happen, it would happen without me having to get the guy down on the ground and say, no, we're going to go to Luxor. You know? And so I said, okay, we'll go there tomorrow. And so he wanted to go there, I think it was 7 or 7:30 or something like that in the morning, the next morning. He wanted to take us straight. He knew that we wanted to go into this tunnel. And he says, get you in there, we'll take you in there first thing tomorrow morning. You can do that first, which was supposed to be the last thing, right? You do that first, and then we'll do some of these other things. And he went in there that evening and got a document. He had to get some kind of document to get in there because it's illegal. I mean, most people you just pay, in Egypt you just pay people off. They just look the other way. But he couldn't do that because of who he was and in the government area. But at the same time, he just got this little document that said that we could go in there. So the next morning at 7 or 7:30, we're all ready. I have my little backpack with a little coat because it's cold in these places. It stays 56 degrees year in, year out, no matter what's going on outside. It's cool in those things. And a little bit of water. And Thoth didn't want me to use flashlights once I got in there, so I had a candle with me and these kinds of things. And I had my little words to say all this stuff, though I didn't know what good they were going to do if I was going to start out first. And I had everything I needed, but I was thinking, oh boy. And so he says, you ready? And he opens the door. Katrina walks out, and Sananda, and my sister, and Jake, and he's begging for me to come out. And you guys who have seen that other video probably think that all I do is get sick when I go around the world, but this is the only 2 times that I've ever traveled, that I've ever done this. It's always been in Egypt. That's why I never want to go back there. But what happened to me is I started to take a step, and this wave of energy came. I mean, I was totally healthy, totally normal, and and I started to take a step, and this wave came over me, like real weird, and I started to go again, and another one, and then another one, and another one. And it's like wham, and then wham, and wham, and wham, 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 wham. And in just minutes, like 2 minutes or less, I was on the ground dying. And I was just dying. That's all I was. I was just dying. I was starting to go unconscious. I was throwing up, everything. I was just like totally losing it. And they came in there to get me, and they had to carry me into my bedroom where I was, and I remember I just barely crawled in. I just barely made it into the toilet to throw up again, and then I almost started getting paralyzed. And they laid me down on the bed, and I got to the place where after a while I could barely open my eyes. I couldn't move my fingers or anything. And I was getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and I was going, this is serious. I've got a problem here. And so I decided that I was going to try to do the meditation, which I knew my feeling was if I could just get this flow going, I'll be fine. And that was when I realized, too late of course, that I didn't know how to do the meditation laying on my side. I'd always done it in this perfect position. And I couldn't make my fingers do the mudras or anything else like that, and I tried for a little while, and I just couldn't get the flow going. Nothing could seem to happen. And I just got sicker and sicker until finally I think I went out for a while. I don't know how long I was. But about something like 3 o'clock in the afternoon or so, or something like that, I kind of came back in, and I realized I really needed help. And so I got Katrina and Sananda. I could still kind of talk, sort of, then. And I got them in there and said, you guys got to help me. You got to get me sat up. And they said, well, what do you want to get sat up for? Just sit me up, will you? And they got me up in position, put my hands over here and everything else like that. And I get oriented to the fields and everything like that. And I began doing the breathing very, very weakly at first. And I started getting it stronger and stronger until I get the flows going. And after a little while, I was okay, and I could start doing it. And I started getting stronger, and I started getting the flows stronger and stronger through me. And within 45 minutes or so like that, I was walking around the room. And I was still a little dizzy. By within an hour or so afterwards, I was feeling pretty good. I felt like, if you ever had the flu, and then the next, when you're over it, you kind of feel like you're not quite here yet. There was a part of me that wasn't quite there, but I was pretty good. And Ahmed walks in. This was maybe 4:30 or something when he walks in. And he comes in, he looks at me. He'd been gone. He comes in and looks at me, and he goes, oh, you're better. He says, oh, you're looking pretty good. I go, well, I'm feeling okay. I'm feeling okay now. He looks at me. He looks at his watch. He looks at me, and he goes, do you think you can travel? I said, well, travel? I said, yeah, I guess I could travel if I have to. He says, well, that train, he says, the French train leaves in an hour and a half, and if you want, we can go back and do this itinerary the way you wanted to do. He says, it leaves in an hour and a half. I guess if you can get on that train, he says, you can go to sleep once you're on the train. It's a long way down there. And so we got on that train and started heading for Luxor. And as I'm heading down that train, I'm saying to myself, did I make myself sick? Just so this would happen. I was really wondering if it was me or if it was Thoth. And those little thoughts were going through my mind. But by the time I got to Luxor, I was pretty good. I was pretty fine. And it all began. And we started moving through all the different temples, one after another, exactly. Saying all the words. Everything was just click, 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 click. No matter, it was just amazing. Everything we wanted to do, it would just open, and we would be there. And finally, we went through all the various steps, just like it, perfectly. And as it turned out, on January 18th, which happened to be my birthday of this body anyway, was the day that we went into the Great Pyramid to be initiated. It wasn't planned, it just, that's the way it happened. And so early in the morning, again, we got our little packs ready and all this other stuff all over again, and we went to the pyramid. And he stopped the flow of the people that were coming. He made them stop, and he put two guides one way and one way the other way, and made them stop. He didn't want anybody to see that I was going down in that room. 18,000 people a day walked to the Great Pyramid. And so they stopped the flow of ants on either side and opened the gates. He says he wanted us to synchronize our watches. He says, you have 1 hour and a half. We will open the gate in an hour and a half for 60 seconds. You better be here. Yes, sir. And we put our little alarms on and everything else like that. And he closes the gate, locks them up. He said he wanted us to get down out of the way, and we got down out of the way so one could see, and then he started to flow again. And he left. He wouldn't go down in there with us. He says, you're crazy. He says, no way, I'm not going in there for anything. And we were then confronted with the sloping tunnel. The tunnel slopes at 23.5 degrees, which happens to be the angle the Earth is sloped at, of course. And we had to move at this 23.5 degree sloped tunnel, which is a square tunnel about this wide and about that high. It's about like that. At an angle, 23.5 degrees, which is pretty sharp. It's like, that's 45 degrees, so it's about like that. The only thing is the angle is just such that, I mean, we sat there for 5 minutes trying to figure out how we were going to get down this tunnel. Has anybody been down that tunnel?
No,
You went into the pit? But no one? You've been, Cho-Cho, you have? How did you get down the tunnel? Did you just crawl, or what'd you do? Slide? You crawled? I mean, I thought we were going to crack up laughing because we couldn't figure it out. I mean, we were just like, because you can't walk, and sliding, it's 100, 300, I forgot how, I think it's 300 feet down there or something. It's like a long ways. And it's, Sananda suggested rolling down. He would. I mean, we finally had to take our backpacks off when we walked like a duck. That was what we ended up doing. And I'll tell you, when I got out of there, I couldn't even hardly walk. I used muscles I didn't even know I had. And so we walked like a duck going down there. And I was the last one going down this whole thing. And I was so intrigued with this whole thing that I had completely forgotten everything. I was just like this, just looking around. And this was, I wasn't even thinking about why I was going down there or nothing. I was just so intrigued with this whole place. And I started walking down there, and we went down there, I don't know, a certain distance. I really don't know when this began. We got down a certain distance, and all of a sudden, I felt a very definite vibrational change in the room. It was a weird, very strange sensation. There's a vibration that moves through the Great Pyramid. It's a vibration that is so strong that it's almost, you can almost hear it. Maybe you can hear it. And it's a sound, like you touch the stone or anything. It's the sound is this. It's keeps going on like that. It's not like Om. It's like the very stones are vibrating, and it just never seems to quit. And however, when I was going down, it, the vibration at this one point suddenly went from to it like dropped an octave, just like that, and it made me stop, and I had a shiver to my spine. I mean, I got goosebumps all over, which I just did. And I looked around. I stopped. I just stopped. I didn't go 1 inch further. And I looked around, and over on both sides of right where I was sitting were these 2 red squares. That were embossed into the stone, or set into the stone. They were made out of some kind of stone. They were about that size. They were with a little opening inside, and a little thing like that, and there was one on either side. And I felt fear. I suddenly felt afraid to go further, and I never, nothing bothers me usually. I mean, really, just nothing. I've done things that are crazy, and here I'm suddenly feeling fear to go into a tunnel, and I start walking down further, and I go down about another 20, 30 feet, and the sound was down lower, and I look over, and here's 2 more of these things on either side of me. And they're spaced at certain distances going all the way down there. And I completely, totally forget anything that he told me and all the training that he gave me about fear. He might as well not have even done it. I didn't remember. I didn't remember about the rings. I didn't remember about checking to see if it's paranoia or what's going on or anything like that. I just felt this fear. And every time I go through these rings, I kept feeling more fear. And so about the 2nd or 3rd ring, which we're only maybe a quarter of the way down this whole thing, I start this conversation, and it starts going off in my head. Oh, I'm not afraid of anything. You know, I'm going like this. You're not afraid, Drunvalo, it's okay. And my head sort of became polarized. And there's this little voice that, I'm saying, you're not afraid of anything, Drunvalo. And this other little voice says, oh, yes, you are. I'm going, no, I'm not. Yes, you are. And I'm going, well, what am I afraid of? And this thing says, you're afraid of spiders. And I'm going, yeah, a little bit. And then it says, what about poisonous snakes? And I'm going, yeah. Yeah, that's one. And I couldn't believe it. It was like, it was so unlike me to do this. And I'm going through this whole thing with myself, going down there, and the sounds were going lower and lower and lower. I got down to the bottom of this thing, and I was just a bundle of nerves, man. I was just like, I was looking for snakes everywhere and everything else like that. And it turns, it makes a 90-degree turn and goes through a little chamber, which, interestingly enough, is not on anything I've ever seen. None of the diagrams of any of the pyramids anywhere, even in the main Rosicrucian temple in San Jose, the main temple there, it's got an exact replica of the whole thing. This room is not there. It's a little tiny room that you go into before you go into the main room. And it's just you come down this long thing and you make a room, and there's just this little tiny room like that before you get into this main bigger room over here. And then you come into this very unusual room. It's a completely, totally female room. There's not a straight line in it. All the rest of the rooms in the Great Pyramid are, perfection and all this stuff. This room looks kind of like this. It kind of comes up like this, and it slopes down. And it comes over, and there's all these funny things over here. And then in the middle of here is the well, which the Egyptians built. That's kind of a little big, I guess. Like that. And this is perfect, and it's all lined in stones perfectly and everything else like that. They did that, but the rest of this room, it was not done. It was just all this kind of, I don't know what all these shapes were and weird things over here, but it was just this weird shape kind of room. almost looked like a cave in a way. And then over here, in also an illogical place, over in this far corner, you entered in from this side, over about right here, and then over in the far corner over there was the tunnel we were supposed to take. Only this tunnel was really little. It was only about that wide and that high.
How many feet high?
Maybe that high, maybe about that high, about that wide. And it went back into the solid earth about 75 or 100 feet. And it was lined with crystals on 3 sides. Little tiny like druzy quartz crystals on 3 sides and silica sand on the bottom. And when you shined a flashlight into it, the light spiraled inside. It was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. I mean, it was, I remember sitting here thinking, it was like the last thing I expected. It really got me, because usually I really expected, you know, some kind of tunnel and thing. I did not expect a crystal tunnel to be in there at all. It just did not occur to me. No one ever said anything about it. It just never occurred to me. And so we all looked inside this tunnel. The other thing is that the light was absorbed. It would only go about 10 feet, and I don't care how bright a light you got, it just wouldn't go any further. I don't know why. It's just little crystals or something would absorb it or reflect it, I don't know. But shine light in there and it just would be black beyond that. And so we all looked inside this tunnel, and each one of us looked inside the tunnel. And then they all looked at me. You got us down in here, you go in that thing first, you know. They didn't, I don't think they really wanted to do it. But we did it. But I remember crawling in this thing. I had to take my backpack off and carry it in front of me because it wouldn't even, it was too low. You had to crawl in this thing. So I'm crawling down this tunnel with my light on here, trying to see where I was going, looking for snakes and spiders and things like this. And it just kept getting stronger in me. And once I started in there, it just got stronger and stronger, completely forgetting my training, totally. Looking, hoping there was no snakes. And these guys are right behind me. And we get all the way down after crawling 100 feet in a little tunnel like that is a long ways. It feels like you've just taken a highway for, I mean, it feels like it felt like we crawled way, 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 way into this thing. And we got down, and I finally got to the place where I could see the end. And I remember the relief in my, there's no snakes, oh good, there's nothing in here. And I remember I put my pack down, I got right up to the back of it, and it looks like whoever dug this tunnel just was digging the tunnel and decided to quit. I mean, you could still see where it had just stopped, the digging. The quartz were on here, but not on the back part. It just was dirt. And I put my pack down, I lit a candle, and then I started to, we're crouched down in this little thing, you know, like you squeezed in this little thing. And then I look right ahead of me, and here's this little hole. It looks just, it goes into the back tunnel. It looks just like a snake hole. It's a little hole in the earth. I shine my little light in there, see if there's any eyes looking back. And the hole kind of curves away, and there's nothing in there. And I go, oh man. And if the hole hadn't been there, I'd have been okay. But there's this hole. And so I realized at that moment that there's no way that I can sit like this inside of that tunnel. I mean, the tunnel would go right to the top of my head. And I'm sitting there going, what am I going to do now? And so I asked Thoth, what am I going to do? He was really right there. He was just watching this whole thing. And I said, what do I do? He says, lay on your back with your head toward the thing so that you can align up with the shaft. So I said, okay, which put that little hole right behind my head. Right? And so I lay down with my head toward the whole thing, and just got a feel for it. You know what does it feel? It feels almost magnetic. You know when you have you ever had two magnets and they kind of go whoom, whoom, that's kind of what that feeling is when it's real strong. And I got approximately where it was, I knew right where it was, sort of, and then I got off center so I wouldn't be right in it, and took the, oh, I still had my flashlight on. Then I lit the candle, turned off the flashlight. He told us to put head to foot, head to foot, head to foot, so we all did that all the way down, this whole thing. And then next thing he wanted me to do was to get the words out. So I got the words out. He wanted me to read them with force, which he didn't in the other ones. I did the other ones, he said to read them. This one he wanted me to do it, which was calling in the 7 lords, who were the original 7 Anunnaki, who started our race, and to open up the halls of Amente and allow us in. And so I had to call them by name. And so I said this whole thing and called the 7 lords in. And he then told me to blow out the candle. And so I blew out the candle. And I went through a series of immediate, rapid experiences. The first one was, the first thing that struck me was this was the darkest place I've ever seen in my entire life, ever. I mean, like, I remember taking my hand and going like this. And with my eyes wide open, I couldn't even feel it. It was like, it was blacker than black. I don't think that there was even one photon in that tunnel. I mean, considering what it had to go down and through and over to here and down this thing, and like, it was just like I never ever experienced. It's like, wow, man, this is black. And then the next thing was, I thought, wow, this is just like being buried alive. But I'm not, I don't have any of those kind of fears at all, so I kind of dug it, actually. It felt good. But I did feel the intense gravitational field of this mountain that was on top of me. I mean, there was a lot of weight up there, and I could feel it. And it felt good. To me, it felt good, but I thought, boy, if you're claustrophobic, man, you're in trouble. Because you can't go this way, you can't go that way, you can't go this way, you can't go that way, you can't go this way. And there's people clogging the tunnel going that way. So those are the sort of the initial things I went through, which took about 15 seconds or something. And then I thought, okay, now I'm ready. And then I remembered that little hole. And my mind switched back to it, and I could feel my mind going back to that little hole. And I'm thinking, oh yeah, the snakes. And I started going through this whole thing all over again. And I couldn't stop it, and it started getting stronger, and the fear came back again. Oh, the snakes are going to crawl out. This is just like, it's like somebody else, you know? And I remember what I did, which it's a good thing it worked, because I just sort of grabbed myself by the collar and said, look, kid, you came how many thousands of miles across here to do this whole thing, and this is really important stuff, and who cares if you die anyway, and all this other kind of stuff like that. And I was just telling myself all that stuff and saying, just do it, just forget it, what if you, it doesn't matter. And it worked for me. It's a good thing it did work, because I believe that if it had not worked, I can feel it starting to happen, and if it had not worked, I probably wouldn't be here today. But I just got to the place where I just got over the top of the fear and just said, I don't care if I die, so what? Let's go on. And at which point Thoth comes in and says, are you ready to go on? I said, yes, let's just go. What do you want me to do? And he says, okay, get into the Merkaba. At that time I was not in the Merkaba all the time like I am now, so I had to reconstruct it each time. I did something that a few days earlier I couldn't even do the simple breathing patterns, and without even thinking, I reconstructed the Merkaba laying on my back. It didn't even occur to me that I was laying on my back. I mean, I guess because I was couldn't tell up and down or anything else anyway, hardly. It was like blackness. So, but I did it. I immediately got into the Merkaba, the counter-rotating fields, and got into the whole thing. And then Thoth came in and he said, he said, are you aware that when you're in the Merkaba like this, that there is light radiating off of your body. And I knew the instructions, intellectually anyway, and everything, and I said, yes, I understand. And he goes, no. He says, do you really understand that there is real light coming off of your body when you breathe like this? And I said, well, I think so. I think I understand what you mean. He says, open your eyes. So I open my eyes. I'm laying on my back looking up at the tunnel. I open my eyes, and what had been absolute black charcoal before, I could see the ceiling clearly. The room was lit up. The space in the tunnel was lit up. And I'm looking at this. It was not like daylight. It wasn't even this bright. It was like a soft moonlight and kind of a whitish, bluish color. And but it was very definite. I could absolutely clearly see all around me, and I could clearly see my hand and everything else. And I'm looking at this, and then the thought came, oh no, somebody has a light on. So I looked down the tunnel to see if someone had a light on. There was no light on. Those guys were just, they were meditating, they were gone. There's no lights. And the light was just around me. And it was not coming from any particular place. It was like the air was lit up. And I looked at this, and I closed my eyes again, and there's Thoth again. And I said, wow, it's pretty good. And he says, he told me to open my eyes again and look at it. So I did. Looked around. It was still there. I could see. I checked it out. Everything was like this. And he says, so I closed my eyes again after a little while, and I looked at him, and he says, I remember saying to him, I says, yeah, okay, I understand. So I said something like that, I understand now. And he says, and I says, okay, what's next? He says to me, isn't lighting the tunnel enough? I said, yeah, okay, yeah, that's enough. And he says, open your eyes, look, watch, just keep looking. Remember what you're seeing. And so for about an hour, I sat in there looking in the tunnel, closing my eyes, looking around, closing my eyes, and looking at this glowing, and keep looking around and doing this kind of stuff for about an hour. And then finally, I remember I had my eyes closed and Thoth was there, because I kept going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Thoth was just sitting there. I had my eyes closed, and the little alarm went off on the watch, which we were ready, because we'd set it for about 10 minutes, I think, before the time when we were supposed to be upstairs. The little beeper went off, and I clicked that like that. And I opened my eyes, expecting it to be light, and it was pitch black. Just absolutely, and it was like a shock. I went, oh God, I'm blinded again. And there I was, and it was blacker than ever. And I had to reach in, find the flashlight, and turn it on, and use an ordinary light now to see with. And we all knew. They all started stirring. They knew that little beeping sound like a beep, beep, beep. It sounded really loud in this little tunnel. And we got out of there and went upstairs. When we got upstairs to the top, we actually got up there a minute or two early and had to wait for them to open the door. And then they opened the door, and my sister went out to the right to go outside because she'd been in the king's chamber a whole lot of times and didn't want to go in. She wanted to go back outside. But the other four of us wanted to, and so we went upstairs and went into the king's chamber. But it was pretty clear to me that the experience was over and that I was now a tourist. And so we just went up and looked around at things and followed it, and there's all these people, hundreds of people in there all around. And we came back out maybe a little while later. I really don't know when it was, half an hour or 45 minutes or an hour later, we came back out of the pyramid. And I really thought it was all over with. I felt like I had completed whatever it was that I had come there to do. But when I went outside, there was a phenomena outside that I did not expect. It did not occur to me that such a thing would be. When we went in there, there was just a few people standing around, a few hundred people standing around that were preparing to come in there, because we went in very early. We went in right when it opened up. So we were going out there. See, it was 7:30, so it'd be 8, 9, probably 9:30, 10, something like that. And we go outside, and there was a sea, and that's the only way I could describe it, a sea of children. And I looked at these kids, and they were almost all children. There was hardly any adults anywhere. It was all kids from about 5 years old. I carefully looked at this. I stood there for a long time. They were all from about 5 years old to about 12 years old. And there was a lot of them, and I can't judge crowds, but it was like thousands and thousands and thousands. It was well over 50,000, 60,000 kids or more. I mean, it was just like incredible what was outside the pyramids. If it was true, and it was true, I saw it with my own eyes, that's why for sure it was true. Children had rung the entire pyramid, which is a big structure. We're sitting there holding hands while we were in there, ringing the entire pyramid. And so I then left there thinking about that, and I started going down to the road that led to Ahmed's house, and I looked over at the other pyramid. There was lots and lots of kids around that one, and they were ringing that pyramid. And I walked around that one, the middle one, and they had the middle one ring, and they also had the third one. All three pyramids were completely surrounded by children holding hands, from about 5 years old to about 12 years old. And I went back, and everybody went in different directions from our group, and I went back all by myself. I just started thinking, what is it? What is, there's meaning of everything. This is really important. Completely forgetting everything else. Even seeing the light in the tunnel didn't seem important. This seemed more important to me. And I remember walking back to Ahmed's house, going up into my bedroom and sitting down and asking the angels to come in. And they came in, and I said, what is this with all these children? And they said to me, don't you remember what we told you 12 years ago? They do this to me all the time. And I go, I don't remember. What do you mean? And you see, they asked me, actually before 12 years ago, they asked me to have a baby, which they said would be the apex of a pyramid, this was their words, of millions of children that would come into the world, that would be interdimensional beings that would help raise the vibration of the planet during this time. And they told me when Zachary, right after, his name was Zachary, they said right after he was born that he'd be an absolutely ordinary kid. You'd never see any difference at all. He'd be a normal child until 13 years went by. Or in other words, until his, no, how do I put this? Until it was 12 years that he had, it had to be 12 years. 12 years went by. I think I'm right on this. Anyway, what it worked out to, they had to wait till his, is this 85? Yeah, till his 13th birthday, right. 12 years had to go by. It had to be his 13th birthday. And then he said that all these children, which would be all over the world, would begin to wake up. And they said, and I hadn't seen my son for 3 years at that time, and I wasn't really thinking about Zachary when I went in there. And they said, do you remember? And then I realized then that it was his birthday on January 10th. Mine was on the 18th, and his was on the 10th, the day that we came in. And they said it's now beginning to happen. The children of the world will begin to waken. I remember flying home. As I was flying home on the airplane, flying back, still thinking about this, I got this Omni magazine, January 1985. And it says, China's psychic children. And I start reading this article, and this is it right here where you can read it. This is incredible if you don't know about this. China, first there was this one child. I don't remember his name. And this one child discovered that he could do things that are supposedly impossible. And then the government became aware of this one child, and then the government began to discover that these children were everywhere. And first they found a few of them, and then hundreds of them, and then thousands of them, and then thousands upon thousands of them. And who knows how many there are in the world. According to the angels, there's millions upon millions upon millions. And at this moment, almost all children being born are of this nature. Maybe, we're talking about 99.999999% of them on the planet. They're almost all these highly evolved, very evolved interdimensional beings. And Omni Magazine, when they heard about these things, they went to China, and they went there in a scientific vein, assuming that that there was a hoax. And so the China gave Omni about, I think they said about a couple hundred of these children to investigate. And they did things like they would take maybe some of them in the back of the room, and they would take a book, and they would flip through the book and rip out a page, crumple it up, and stick it under their arm. And every one of these kids could read every word on the page, every time, without any errors at all, ever. And they could rip out another page, and they could do the same thing. And they had tested them on every psychic level you can think of. You can read about it in here, with no errors at all, none. Perfect. And Omni's went away saying, wow. Well, these kids are now popping up all over Russia, all over Japan, all over China, Canada, all over the United States, and those are the primary places, though they're in Europe, and they're coming up all over the world. And there's a lot of people that don't know what to do. They're extraordinary in all kinds of levels. And according to the angels, it will be the children that will initiate the transformation. They will be the ones. They will be the ones that begin doing the things that we're trying to do, and they will be the example that will lead us out. It was the same thing that happened with the dolphins, the legend of the golden dolphins. The dolphins and the whales, the adults, couldn't make the transformation, and it was the baby dolphin, the golden dolphin, that was able to make the transformation and lead them out.